All right, hi everybody. I'm Pace Ellsworth. I'll be your instructor this evening. Since we had a late start, this will be a little bit of a shorter class, but should be just fine. I actually had planned to go over the CSS units today, but we did cover that last week. So I actually still want to see and share, if you could, your Module 4 projects from last week, please. So I'm just going to post that in Slack, and then I'm going to post the question link and the schedule for today. And then also actually some links as well. Okay, there we go. So let me share my screen and show you what I'm looking at over here. So the schedule for the day, we got a late start, so we're actually going to skip this break and skip the CSS units, but we wouldn't have time for them anyway. And also we did go over CSS units in a previous week. We'll talk about the project and then we'll be done. So we're going to do basically just in about 30 minutes, we'll have a break. First, we're going to talk about accessibility and design layouts in general. And then after the break, we'll talk about media queries, and then we'll answer any questions and talk about the project. Okay. So let's see what you shared from last time. This is the portfolio. So I'm sure some of you had some very creative ones, and I'm just excited to see that so many of you have this opportunity to start building something that's you. Start building something that's all about you, and it can be just whatever you want it to be. And this is a place where you can put your projects. You can basically pick and choose. You could link to your GitHub from here, but you could also pick and choose from your GitHub your most interesting or most extensive or challenging projects to highlight on your web page. So that'd be cool. Mike's got this one, very awesome. Y'all have different styles and everything, taking advantage of the border radius, the background colors, flexbox galore. Some of you have some different examples. Let's check out this one and this one. Raphael got the gradient background going on, some good screenshots, some hover actions on these images. That's cool. And social links. And Mark, another different type of hover animation action. That's cool. I like that. And very good styles all around. Still working on that about page. Poured all his heart and soul into the homepage, and it looks good. All right, so thank you for sharing those. Let's jump into this topic of accessibility, if we could. And let me start a new thread about that. Okay. All right. So please reply, if you could, to the thread I just posted on accessibility, and give me your thoughts. What is accessibility? What does it mean first of all, what does it mean in a context outside of technology, outside of computing and the internet? And then what does it mean in this context as well? So see that most recent thread in WebPT29. So the ability to access the website with ease, no matter what impediments you have otherwise, making websites accessible for people with disabilities, yes. To adapt your page to be viewable by all types of people, yes. Okay, unbiased design. I like that. That's a very concise description. I love that, unbiased design. It really is like that. So this concept of accessibility is just, the internet is this amazing invention, right? This amazing tool that in so many ways makes us all more equal, or makes it possible for millions more people to access things that never could access those things in the past, right? We can, at this point, we're at this point in humanity's history where someone on the other side of the world can come up with an idea and can put it out there on the internet, and then someone on the opposite side, closer to here, can take that idea and run with it, turn it into a big project, and this can all happen. Basically things can change overnight, um, and that's never been possible before. Things have not never been able to be changed overnight worldwide before. It's an amazing thing. But not just that, people can be involved in these changes all over the world instantly, even if they have some form of physical disability, mental disability that makes it difficult for them to otherwise engage in society in some ways, right? Or they just need some assistance. So there are tools that we can use to make our websites more accessible so that more people can access them. And this is a very, very easy thing to do. Generally, it's almost always the case. If you just make your website more accessible, it's going to be better for even people that don't have any disabilities. It's going to be a better experience for them as well, because basically ability exists on this continuum, right? And so there are all sorts of different levels of these disabilities, and it's an important thing to remember that you can just make a website look better by making it accessible. Okay, and so I have a lot of links here that talk about why accessibility is important and some best practices. So there are some basic fundamentals that you can start with, and they just have to do with keeping things clean, organized, not having things overlap, making sure that at different sizes of your screen things aren't hidden. Using keyboard navigation is good, so that way you can use space bar to scroll down or use the arrow keys. And not just that, a lot of people a lot of people just use tab to go between links on the page. That's how they get from one place on the page to another. And then um, making sure there's a good contrast. Like if this was really light gray on white, that wouldn't look too good. If it was green on blue, that wouldn't look too good. Who remembers websites, from 20 years ago where it was orange font on a red background, and it looks bad, right? That's just the way that websites used to be when people didn't think about accessibility at all because there were no rules, right? And you kind of see this on the fringes if there are certain like niche topics online, like new websites for cryptocurrency or for like certain political groups. Like the style is bad because these are not well developed groups, and they haven't really put themselves out marketing wise very well. So making sure that the body text is a minimum of 16 pixels is a really good thing. Keeping good contrast, keeping the spacing between the lines good. You don't want them to be like right up next to each other. It'd be hard to read. And these are just things that make it easier for everyone to read the text on your website. Don't rely exclusively on colors. So don't use just tons and tons of colors that might clash, and especially not to um, like if you outline a box in red to indicate that there's an error, you should still also have like an exclamation point or a warning message or an error message to indicate um, something that's wrong. And that's always good. It's just always good to have multiple different impressions, multiple different reasons to do these types of things. And someone brought up that similar to how you can you're in violation of some laws, or it's definitely bad form for a company with a physical space for customers not to have some accessibility features in order to accommodate people with disabilities. Websites can even be sued for having bad compliance for accessibility features as well. So it's a pretty important topic, but it's just really good form. It's like, who does not want to have more customers, more visitors on their website? especially if it's an easy thing to do. And these are generally things that are just going to make your website look better anyway. Okay. Accommodating your HTML content for screen readers. One big portion of this is something that we learned on the first day with HTML. If you use semantic HTML, it's not only easier for SEO purposes, for robots to organize and understand where your content is laid out on your web page, but it makes it easier for screen readers to say, okay, hey, this is the article section. Oh, this is just a link section. And this is the header. Okay, this is important information. So just the way you lay out your HTML and CSS can make a big difference for accessibility. That's just one link. There are many others, and I think this one tool was one that I showed you the other day. And we can just take Lambda School, for example. And there are great things about this page. There's a lot of good contrast, but there are things that are not perfect, right? If we're to take just lambdaschool.com just to compare, I mean, there are a few things on here that could be a little bit better, right? Right off the bat, I would probably say there are some places where perhaps the text is a little small, or maybe the images don't have alt tags, things like that. And this will show you, this tool, wave.webaim.org, will show you an accessibility evaluation and give you some examples of things that can be changed. So there's a contrast error here. And these are, remember, this is just a bot. It's just an automated process. So some things, it'll overcorrect. Not everything is a real big issue. But you can look at these things and identify different ways that you can improve. Okay. 86 features, null or empty alt text, structural elements, and then ARIA. These are very important as well. Let's see, this is elements. There we go. This is accessible rich internet applications, and it's a set of HTML attributes that define ways to make web content more accessible. So this was something that was added in HTML directly, and so you can add things like ARIA value now, ARIA value min, ARIA value max, and it's the markup bar for a progress bar widget, things like that. And you can set these values. There's not total widespread support for ARIA, but there are a lot of things you can do with it. And so it's a big topic. We're not going to go into a ton of depth. I never do, but there are some examples that you can use. So yeah, it's a good thing to look into, especially roles. And this is an attribute that can just help you describe kind of the purpose of a certain element on the page. Okay. All right, so that is accessibility, and it's pretty useful feature, because really the better you do with your accessibility, the better it is going to be for people that are trying to access your content. Remember again that we have our question link, so if you want to pop anything in there, please do. Accessibility isn't going to be a huge requirement on the project you're going to have today, but it is in the general context of responsiveness. So this last important concept in accessibility is responsiveness. What does your website look like when it is on desktop versus mobile? So here's a comic site. I like this comic a lot. It's called xkcd.com. But one thing I can tell you is that it's not a very responsive website. There's nothing in it that makes it more adapted to a mobile device, other than that if you look at it on a mobile device, it'll start smaller, but still, it's not really adapted to a mobile specs or anything like that. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is how to adapt your website for different size devices. So let's take a look at that. This layout would be called a fixed layout. Fixed layouts are ones that you have, and let's do a little other thread for layouts. So fixed layouts are ones that are like this. Everything is hard-coded. There's no change in any of the features whatsoever with different widths on the page, right? Different size devices. So that's what's considered a fixed layout. So there are no media queries. Media queries are these special CSS selectors that let you basically have a subset, a conditional set of CSS selectors for different device sizes. So that's no media queries on fixed layouts. What are some of the other types of layouts that we can have? I don't know if you've checked the objectives, go ahead and drop them in the layouts thread that I put at the bottom of Slack. There are 3 other layouts aside from fixed that we're going to be talking about now. Okay. Fluid, adaptive, and responsive. Yeah. So there are a bunch of other websites that are fluid. We can look at a busy homepage like Yahoo's. Yahoo's basically had the same general style on their homepage for the past 25 years, right? It's been busy. And what you could tell from this is that they have some changes happening, right? They have some automatic changes happening as you change the size of the page. You can see things getting smaller, you can see things shrinking. And oddly, some portions of this page are responsive, some are not. And really, like, this isn't a fantastic example of responsiveness because of the way they've built this out. But what if we look at this from a mobile perspective and then we refresh the page? Now that it knows I'm trying to look at this from a mobile device, it has a completely different style, right? It has this more boxed style. And then if we try to stretch that out, it gets all messy, right? Because you're not meant to look at a phone style on a screen like this. So that's so yeah, let's go back out, and just so you know, there's this little tool up here that you can look at called the toggle device toolbar, and you can actually look at what websites look like on iPhones and on iPads by just clicking these different options. And you can do this on Firefox as well, and almost any other browser. You can toggle the device toolbar. There are actually a ton of things in here. We could teach a whole unit just on the tools that are in the dev tools, but yeah, it's good to learn them. So that's Yahoo, and obviously this is not, the desktop version of the page. Now that it knows I'm looking for desktop, I refresh and it gives that to me again. So this is what would be called an adaptive layout. It adapts to different devices, right? It has a fixed version of the site that's small and a fixed version of the site that's big. There's a little bit of responsiveness going on though, right? This section right here is experiencing what is a fluid. This column is a fluid column because it is moving. It is shrinking proportionally with the width of the site, right? But once you get to a certain point, it's Yahoo is backwards compared to most modern websites. Usually once you get to a certain point, it becomes responsive. Instead, Yahoo starts responsive and then breaks under a certain dimension, because what they're going to do is under this dimension, if you refresh, they'll give you the website. Actually, they don't even serve this dimension right now. They just said, hey, if you're 800 pixels, then you're in bad luck. But if you're down under 700 pixels, well, they don't really serve you either. Let's see if they can actually do a good job. If I go down to 390, Not even. They've detected that I'm on a desktop device and they're just doing a bad job of it. So I would compare that with another site. So let's look at Apple and see how they look. So you take Apple, right? And then you go down, shrink it, and you can see that it just gets, like, no matter how small you go, it just stays clean. You're not missing anything. No content is hidden. Everything just moves over to the side. Some things get smaller, but in general, it's fluid. They don't miss a single pixel. Everything just adapts and responsively grows as you move the page. So props to Apple for being consistent. Yeah, so those are the different layouts. Fixed, where it's going to be the same no matter what width. So you're usually, if you have a smaller device, it's going to cut something off. And then let's do a review here. Fluid is going to be relative measurements. So it's going to be percentage based. It's proportional to the width of the page. But because of that, if you have purely fluid design, if you get really small, things are going to get squished. You know, they're going to get really, really skinny. And that won't look too good, especially if you have like a 3-column page. You're going to have to account for that. Normally what happens on a good responsive design is some of those columns are either going to disappear or they're going to go in a, 3 columns are going to go to 2 columns or 1 column, and all the content's just going to be moved in sequence. Adaptive is where you have multiple fixed layouts and you separate those by media queries. So you have like a desktop version, a tablet version, and a mobile version. And that's a fairly simple thing to do. You just have 3 fixed width layouts: big, medium, small, or often just big, small. The best one is a responsive layout. If you look at something like, I believe, even our question thread, if we open that up, let's try this event. All right. Okay, so if we do this, let's just see how well Slido does on its responsiveness. You can see after a point, it doesn't let the font get too small, but it does shrink it a little bit. See, at that point, it doesn't let it get any smaller than that. But yeah, this is really, really responsive, as you can tell. Pay attention to how certain elements disappear as I go from a big view to a small view. So I'm going down. Like, why would this matter right here? What's the purpose of a QR code? Go down in the layouts thread. What is QR code typically used for? It's typically to get you from a desktop view to a mobile view, right? Because you're usually going to take your camera on your smartphone and then use that to open up the question thread. In fact, if someone wants to stretch, then you can try that now if you want. But at a certain point, as you can see, at about 790 pixels, it disappears because it's like, hey, you're already on a mobile device. So I don't even need to think about it. I don't need that QR code anymore. And this is also just to help you get onto a mobile device, because otherwise, if you're on desktop, it's easier to share the link. Okay, and then as you can see, it's just gradually shrinking from that point. So this is what's called a responsive layout. It has multiple breakpoints and changes the way it behaves at these different breakpoints. Very interesting here because the text stays the same size until I reach what's traditionally a mobile layout. So once you reach about 450 pixels, the text starts getting a little bit smaller to make sure that you can fit multiple questions on the same page, but it doesn't get too small. So, and as you can see, that it's the same width and height for any of these cells. So this is a, thank you, Anonymous, for achieving the stretch. And Slido, this wall application is a fantastic example of responsive design. Okay, so we're going to come back to the from the break, answer these questions. Feel free to pop more in. Remember to upvote them, and then we will be going over how we execute these media queries and how those actually work. Okay, just as a quick review, and this is what we're going to cover in depth, but the media rule that I'm talking about, the difference between these four right here, which I'll post separately. Okay. Just pin that right now because that's extremely important. When I say at media right here, this is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the at media rule, and there are only 4 or 5 rules in CSS completely. There's another one right here, import, another one keyframes, and another one font face. And it's not an insult. It's just a special rule that you can put in a number of settings for fonts and things like that. So the way media query works is basically you have a special type of selector called a rule called at media. So you start saying at media, and then there are a few properties that are normally on here. You're normally going to say only and screen. And so we'll go into depth of those, but the values are down here. And then just inside these curly braces, you're going to put all the CSS that you want to be conditional. It's like an if statement. Like if a certain condition occurs, then we look at this CSS. Otherwise, we're not going to look at it. So it's going to be under a certain condition. All right, so we'll look at that after the break. We'll go ahead and get that timer for 5 minutes. So feel free to get some water, stretch, and this will be our only break. After that, we'll just actually we'll get to the questions at the end of class today, just to make sure we have time to get everything into the media queries. So ask as many questions as you have, and we'll go from there. See you soon. 3, 2, 1, done. Oh, okay, there we go. All right, it's time. Let's get back to it. Quick review. So we talked about accessibility. We talked about the 4 basic design layouts. We have fixed design, fluid design, adaptive design, and responsive design. And there are tons of great examples and tons of poor examples. So another one of these good references to just go over a few of these fine-tuned differences and a lot of the reasoning why we have these 4 different layouts is that obviously since the invention of smartphones, more and more and more of all website views have transitioned to mobile devices, right? So it's the majority now of all website views are on mobile devices. So a vast majority. As a result, you're going to need to do more mobile first design. What that means is planning for mobile devices, not just desktop devices. And so this has some just different examples of those different layouts. Okay, so let's look a little bit into this media rule and see how this makes it all possible. Okay. Okay, so in this example, you can follow along with me. I'll share it with you. We're just going to play with this number right here, 600 pixels. And so as you can see, this says right up here what the result size is. So keep an eye on that number. And we're down to 700, 650. So what we should expect is as soon as it hits 600, it turns light blue, okay? And that's how that works, right? Now we can change anything else that we want in this as well. Doesn't have to just be that. We could change paragraphs. It's literally a CSS file inside of a CSS file. That's all it is. So you could do anything in here. You could change the font color to yellow. Actually, it's just color in it. Just color. We can run that, and as we can see, when it goes down, yeah. How's the contrast on that? Not too good, huh? Let's change that. Let's make it brown and see how that goes. That's a little bit better. Okay. So yeah, that's what you can do with the media rule. Okay, and now I'll explain these 2 words right here, only and screen. And when you use them, you'll have to use and. But the purpose of only, purpose of screen is to say it's for all visible devices, for computer screens, tablets, smartphones, etc. There are certain other ones. If you use print, it's going to say, I want to change the style up just for when I'm printing. So you'll go on some websites and then you'll go to print. And on that print dialog, as you can see, where'd the sidebar go? It's gone. It's off. It done disappeared on us. And that can happen because it can be specified in the logic that if I go to print, then that's gone. You can also use this as a little security tool, right? So if there's something on your site that you don't want to have it be printed, and you want to make it at least a little hard for someone to print that thing, then you could put it in your CSS media query that under a certain size, it's just going to display none, that item. So we could even do that here. Let's try that out. It's gone. So if you want to protect something from just regular print commands, then you can hide things using print. Let's see if we can even do that well, no, I don't know if we could test that here. So that's what screen does. It says for computer screens, and print is an alternative. Speech is for screen readers that read the page out loud. So you could add certain things as Easter eggs just for people that use screen readers. That's an interesting thing. And then there are all these other things that you can put in the media features, but the ones that are most common are just, where is it? Only. Only is a keyword that prevents older browsers that don't support media queries from applying the specified styles. Okay, so it's only there so that if for some reason the media query is called, but it's on a really old browser that doesn't support media queries, it'll just ignore the alternate styles. So that's just something to keep in mind, that since media queries weren't there at the very beginning of CSS, then since they came after, they are only supported by 99.99% of browsers today. Normally it'd be people with very old devices that they never updated that would have a different experience. But they're going to have tons of problems on all kinds of websites today anyway. Okay, so let's go back to here and just try out a few other things. Now, I don't have to only have one breakpoint. I could have as many as I want. So I'm going to change this to another breakpoint at, you know what, let's change this one to 900, keep that one at 600, and then we'll keep one at 400. Okay. Actually, pretty common breakpoints are 1000-ish, 800-ish, and 500-ish. Now, there is, this one would often be 768. When monitors first came out, they were first getting big with PCs. This was like the maximum width on those really small CRT monitors, and the pixels were really big. And then monitors got bigger, and this didn't really matter anymore. But the horizontal dimension on many iPads is 768 pixels, and it's kind of a nice number for aspect ratio. And then the higher end ones for desktops. Normally desktops today are closer to 1200 or bigger. So you can just set a desktop width there, and then set tablet widths to between those, and then set, you know, the so this would be like for desktops, for large desktops, regular desktops, tablet size, and then smartphones. So let's make these a little bit different. Let's do a background color of light, I don't even know what light red would look like, and light purple. Let's do light green. Let's try that. Okay. Oh, there is a light green, there's a light blue. There's not a light red. That'd probably just be pink. There we go. So we start with yellow, then we go to pink and light green and light blue. And now instead of display none, let's change the color to something else. Let's do brown, color red, and then color purple. Let's try that. Okay, so we start big, medium, small, and tiny. Pretty cool, huh? And then you can, you could set different things on here to make these more responsive at different sizes. So maybe I could set at this highest breakpoint, or right here, I could set my paragraphs to be a font size 5 VW. Ooh, that'd be interesting. Whoa, big. And now, interesting enough, is because I didn't change that, I had the font size right here. Does the font size get overwritten later on? No, because this is still in effect while this happens and this happens and well, those are the only other two conditions. So it's still in effect when I go down to those levels. Okay, that's a change that I made there. But I could change it to 2. And if I wanted to go here, I could change it to 3. And if I go down here, I could change it to 16 pixels just so it keeps a 16 pixel minimum. Okay. All right. So makes it a little bit more of a responsive experience. The proportions are not great, but you get the idea. Okay. So let's review that real quick. Talked about media queries, accessibility. I want to show you this one. Let's see. I know that I had, here it is. What I want to do also today is give you a little bit of a preview into JavaScript. So what I'm going to do is do that at the very end of class. But let's talk about the project first, and then we'll get into questions, and then we'll get into a little bit of a preview of JavaScript, because that's what the rest of our time together is going to be next class, and then next week, and then the 2 weeks after that. So 7 more classes after today, and it's all going to be JavaScript. So let's go to the project for today. That's not it. Here we go. Okay, and I guess we didn't do a review of what this whole sprint is going to be. So today was responsive design, where we covered fixed and fully responsive layouts, accessibility challenges, and those flexible units that we use to overcome those, so M's and REMs and percentages. And then talked about how we make sites responsive using media queries. And then, so a little bit more to go into. Next class, we're going to talk about the intro to JavaScript. We're going to cover a lot. We're going to cover a lot on that day. So I'm going to see if we can get, at least a little bit of a taste today. But we're going to cover variables, math, conditionals, operations, loops, functions, and other just basic data forms. And then we'll go into depth on arrays and on objects, because those are extremely, extremely important to the way you store data, large amounts of data in JavaScript, and basically how you're going to move information around your website and from one website to another. Okay, so we looked at fixed, fluid, adaptive, and responsive. We looked at media queries. And then if you want to review the units, I would highly recommend, actually this is an accessibility video. I would highly recommend looking at the units and the links that we have here that go into M's and REMs and pixels, and why we use M's and REMs and not just pixels. It's for accessibility, but it's also going to make your code a lot easier to read and write, and it makes your web page a lot easier to manage when you use media queries and you have multiple sizes. Okay. All right, so let's take a look at the project. portfolio 2. So you're going to go back. This is interesting, okay? This is the only time we're going to do this. So these are going to be in a new branch in the same repository, okay? You're going to go into the same project that you used last class, the same one, the same portfolio. You're going to CD into it. You're going to create a new branch like this one, first name, last name, day 2, okay? If this is already the second time you're coming to this module because you flexed, then do like first name, last name, -2, -day 2, something like that. All right, implement the project you newly created, or go back and keep editing your existing portfolio. Okay, and you're going to make changes to that same project. So don't clone this one. Just go back and edit your existing one. You're going to insert a viewport meta tag into the head with these HTML attributes: content width, device width, initial scale 1. So the main viewport meta tag looks like this: meta name viewport, content width equals device width, initial scale 1.0. This is a meta tag. You're going to put it inside of the head of the web page. You're not going to put it anywhere else. So let me give this to you. And the viewport meta tag looks like that. Okay. What this does is it basically controls the viewport and just resets the viewport to no zoom, and fixes the width to the width of the device. So just to make sure that your the content will fit on the device in a better way. Okay. So it'll take something like this, and then it will make it, boom, instant mobile responsiveness. It's a very, very important feature, and not all pages do this. Okay. All right, so that's what you'd have to do for that. Introduce max width media queries into your project at 800 pixels and at 500 pixels. Add some accessibility features to your web page as well. The design should follow closely the mobile wireframe given for your chosen layout. So you look at these different layouts. If you chose option 1 for your home page, it's going to be option 1. If you chose option 2 for your home page, it's going to be option 2. And if you chose option 3 for your home page, it's going to be option 3. Okay. This one's a little weird. Just going to say that, but I don't know. If you chose option 3, that's yours. So it's really just going to be, you change up the style a little bit in the CSS, and just keep in mind, you'll test this on those devices, on those device sizes. How do you test device sizes again? An easy way is to just hit F12, toggle the device toolbar, and if you want to set it for an exact size, besides just going to tablets and iPhones, you can hit responsive, and you can just set it. You could set it to 500 pixels wide, and whatever you want to set to tall. Okay, or you could set it to 400 pixels, etc. Or since this is your web page, you could just turn this off, and then just use this right here to take it down to 600 and 500 and see where it goes from there. Okay. All right, so that is that part. Oh, get back to the project design. Okay, and so that's all you have to do is just introduce other media queries, style it so it looks good at those media queries, and then follow the mobile wireframe. Mobile wireframe obviously is only giving you the mobile dimensions. It's not giving you the tablet dimensions. So just get creative with the tablet dimensions. Or really they're saying iPhone, laptop, widescreen. These would be, okay, test your website at several breakpoints, test your website accessibility. It's easy to do the stretch on this one, you're just testing. But then you start over with min width media queries. So the difference between min width and max width is basically just, is this going to be a mobile first site where the default CSS is the smallest size, Or is it going to be a desktop first site where the default CSS is the largest size? Okay, so if you were to switch everything to min width, it would be like this. Once my web page gets above 500 pixels, then change the style. Once it gets above 768, once it gets above 1000 pixels. Not just that though, you're going to have to move, if you're going to switch to min width, you need, you're starting the default CSS up here is the smallest. And then you get bigger and bigger and bigger. So you actually have to move the items backwards. Okay. So now if I run this, my default CSS is up here. And then actually my default, sorry, is down here. And then I get bigger, and then I get bigger, and then I get bigger. Okay, so I change my rules just like that. Okay. So keep that in mind about min width. Min width basically means a mobile first design. You can totally do that. Most websites still use max width as the default, just because that's the way that websites have traditionally been built. They're built by computer engineers on computers, so websites are normally built first for computers. But most customers nowadays, they're looking at your site on their phone. So you got to keep that in mind. Okay, and so this is that project. Remember, you're not going to clone this one. You're going to just go back into your project from last class and continue it. Okay. All right, so let's go into some questions and see what time we have left for CSS. So here's the Slido. I totally had this open. Okay. Why does responsiveness use media queries like adaptive does when responsive should automatically fit every screen and doesn't have breakpoints? I'm not sure if I follow. Basically, what the difference between a fixed, a fluid, and responsive design is a fixed design, no media queries, no multiple breakpoints, right? Fluid design, no multiple breakpoints, but everything is squishy. The problem with that is, as you can see, maybe your elements are going to look too wide on a big screen and they're going to look too small on a small screen. So instead, what you do with adaptive and responsive design is, and it took me a while to get this too, okay? So I don't blame you if it's a little bit confusing. But for an adaptive design, and these are just two very similar words, they're basically synonyms, but they represent two different things in this philosophy, right? Adaptive just means multiple fixed layouts. Responsive means multiple fluid layouts. And really, most websites, like this website itself, they tend to be multiple fixed layouts at the top. Fixed, 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 fixed. And then you get here, now it's suddenly a responsive layout. You see what it does with the images? You squish, but now here they don't squish. It's just more white space. No squish, just more white space. No squish, just more white space, okay? So those are the differences between fluid and adaptive. Or sorry, adaptive and responsive is what I meant to say. The difference is adaptive is purely multiple fixed layouts. Responsive is multiple layouts. One of them or more of them are fluid. Okay, so they have a flexible container. And you could use flex boxes a lot. If you use flex boxes very often, you're going to have a responsive website. Okay. But yeah, good question. When do you grade assignments and will you ever leave feedback? Good question. So we have, 50, 90 students. I am not going to be able to give individual feedback, but you do have peer mentors for that purpose. As far as grading assignments, the way that they're graded is 20% for module. Let's see if I can find it. It's 20% for the module checks for understanding. So you just filling out that check for understanding, you're giving yourself your own grade for that. What is your understanding of the material? Is it good? Is it excellent? Or is it just okay? Or is, less than okay? Then the 20%, another 20% is the module self-assessment. So that's the little quiz that you take for each module, right? And then a 30% for the sprint assessment. So that's that 7-question quiz that happens after you submit your sprint challenge. So we're not grading you on the sprint challenge project directly. We are going to in the next class. Okay, so in the next sprint. So in this sprint now, we're going to be doing a lot of JavaScript. And so you're going to be submitting a JavaScript project. And in that, it's going to actually have the tests locally. So you're actually going to know what your grade is while you're doing it, which is kind of cool. So that'll be part of your grade there. But for module 1, or for sprint 1, it was 20% modules, 20% module check for understanding, 20% module self-assessment, 30% the sprint assessment, 30% the sprint retrospective. So I know a lot of you forgot to enter the sprint assessment, forgot to enter the retrospective. So you didn't get a good grade in sprint 1, but that's okay. Okay, grades are not like make or break in Lambda School, not nearly as much as it is in other educational institutions. All right, what we really care about is, do you have an understanding of the material, so that you and if you don't, then you can flex to repeat the unit and get a better understanding of it. Okay. Icons like drop-down menus can be drawn with CSS instead of using images. Is it better for responsiveness? Yeah, I mean, you shouldn't use images for drop-down menus. No, you should use CSS. And there are some basic HTML and CSS for drop-downs. And you can use JavaScript to make drop-downs even better. For responsiveness, you use rems and percentages instead of pixels. Yes, 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 yes. Rems, ems, and percentages instead of pixels. How intricate is the difference between using rems and pixels for responsiveness? It's a little intricate. It just depends, right? It depends on whether or not your responsive styles, like your different size styles for your media queries, or just the designs of your components, whether they take the size of the HTML font size into account. So if you change the HTML font size with different screen sizes, then it'll be responsive with rems. Rem is root M, root M. The root element of a HTML page is the HTML element. So you're setting the font size on that, and the default font size is 16 pixels. So that's equal to 1 rem. How would you use the only keyword? You just throw it in there. Okay, so it's just going to be like this: media only, screen, and min width. It's totally optional nowadays. I mean, it does help support ancient browsers, but basically it'll ignore media queries with ancient browsers that don't support that. But where am I? It's not a super important thing. Do you have to code out a web page for browsers that don't support? It's good idea. It's good practice to throw those 4 letters in there on media queries, just to have it make sure it doesn't, because here's the thing: if you don't include only, it might break the entire CSS. If the CSS gets written and it reads that and it's like, oh, what is this? Does it automatically ignore it? It'll automatically ignore the media queries if they don't support the media query. If the web browser does not support media queries and it sees only, then it will safely ignore the media query. Can margins and padding also be responsive? Which unit would be the best to use as their value? Very good question. This really depends. Margins, 100%, 100%. Margins typically are going to be percentages, right? You can see that the margin gradually disappears as you get smaller. Very often that's the case. Padding can change too, but at some level you don't necessarily want to have less space between the wall of your box and the text. So I would just be careful with having minimum values for those as well. How can we calculate the contrast ratio? Oh, good question. There are tools. I don't know of one specifically, but we could look for some. If anybody can find a really good, just calculate CSS contrast ratio, things like that. Yep, and this was from last class. So just make sure that if you didn't put in your attendance, you have 4 minutes left to do that. So let me get to the link that was shared so dutifully by Brian. So here, here is that attendance link, and it was code 9354. Okay, I'm just gonna share that. I'm just gonna share that post because you got 3 minutes left to do that attendance. And if you haven't marked yourself down as done for that, then please do. Okay, don't forget the attendance. All right, and then last questions. It's possible to organize code review session in live on some of our projects or sprint challenge. Yeah, so I have done a couple code review sessions for the sprint challenge, not all the projects, but if you want to organize amongst yourself a group, totally fine. Please do it. You could put out a message in the help channel, say, hey, who wants to get together and do code review together on the project or the sprint challenge? You totally can. I don't know about how many times you can flex total. That's a student success question. You know who your student success coordinator is? It's Anisha Harper. Yeah, font face. That's right. How would you change the width to be repressive unit? I think you mean responsive. Width, you would just set it to a percentage. You can use it. Width is very often set to 100%, which is a responsive thing. How does @media affect display flex with wrap? Would you have to do a whole new website in each @media to make sure the flex works properly? No, that's the beauty of Flexbox, is it's just going to use whatever size that it has, right? All media is saying is if the website is a certain width, then here's my CSS for that. So you just have to test it. You just have to test your Flexbox on that certain dimension, and then maybe you change it, from a Flexbox to something else under that dimension. Viewport meta tag makes things more responsive, but we have to do some more to make it more responsive. Yes, there are lots of little pieces. Okay, it's like I have to put headers on my website and paragraphs and images. What? They're just multiple things you can do. We had a mock interview that we were supposed to do. Do you know anything about that? No points. Also a student success question. I know that's something more to do with your career prep, and you're going to do a lot of career prep later on. If you missed the attendance code, it is in Slack. You've got a few seconds. It's the most recent link that I posted in Slack. On the project for tomorrow, we're supposed to be making our portfolio site responsive. Do we just work off previous repo? Yes, that's correct. You just work off the most previous repo, the one that was the portfolio site from module 4. What if you have the viewport meta tag in the first project? Is that okay? Yeah, that's totally fine. You can put it in any project you want. How did I do the F12 thing? By hitting F12 on my keyboard. You can also do it with Control-Shift-I, okay, or Command-Shift-I, or you can do it by right-clicking anywhere on the page and hitting inspect. Okay, there are 3 ways you can get there. If you're on a laptop and having a hard time with F12, you might have a function key that you have to hold down while you hit F12. That's why it's just easier to do Control-Shift-I or to right-click and hit inspect. Would we be creating a new branch for the project independent from our sprint challenge? Yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. You make a new branch, call it first name, last name, day 2, and then submit that. What if we haven't really completed the other projects in full, but are half somethinging it due to us learning slow for the next project? Hey, submit your projects. Submit every single project. Submit all of them, please. Even if they're not done, submit them and then finish them later when you can. But just don't get behind. Like seriously, stay on track as far as that goes. So if they're not perfect, I don't mind. I want you to be able to progress and to learn. And you're going to learn the most by learning lots of different topics. Okay. These are called design layouts. They're called design layouts. They're called layouts. Let's cover JS just a little bit. Okay. This is a JS cheat sheet. I need to fix this one thing so that it doesn't mess you up. Let's see if that did it. There we go. All right, so here is my JS cheat sheet, and there are many other better JS cheat sheets out there, but this is just a quick review of JavaScript. Everything that you're going to want to know about JavaScript for this sprint. So the next 3 classes, we're going to talk about variables. We're going to talk about, and there are 3 different types of variables. There's called var, let, and const. We're going to talk about console log. We're going to talk about different types of data, strings, numbers, booleans, arrays, and objects. And there's also functions and other primitives. And there are operations like concatenation, interpolation, math operations, and then increment operations, logical operations. And then there are object properties that have functions are called methods. Then there are functions themselves. Functions are basically just mini JavaScript scripts inside of your JavaScript code. It's just a little snippet of code that you can call whenever you want to, or never. It's up to you. And different ways of writing functions. And that's basically everything that we're going to cover. Okay, so just different logical operators and the way we store information and the way we trigger different JavaScript commands. So I would just go over this a little bit and just kind of walk through it from the top. Anytime you see console.log, it's going to have some kind of an output over here on the right side. So if you want to just comment them out, all the other console.logs that you don't want to see, you can just go through and comment out all of the other console logs. So you can just see it one by one, you know, just watch this go bit by bit. Okay, so if you do that, I didn't get all of them, but I did some of them. Then you can see just, you start from the top and you can see a little bit more. Okay, all right, there we go. Okay, so check that out and be ready for the next class. If you do this, if you understand everything on this, you can pass the sprint. You can get all 7s on the sprint assessment the next time around. Okay, so I'll keep that handy. And that is it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Let's stop the screen share. All right. Thank you again for your patience today. Sorry I had a late start, but we got to cover everything that we needed to. And yep, let's definitely, I'm around. Let's see if you have any more questions. What I'm going to do now is just go ahead and end the meeting so that we can get the recording done. But I will be available shortly after that. We can review anything else you want to review. Okay. See you guys later. Have a great night.